Good Wednesday morning, everyone. Look at Mayor Sue waving right away. Oh, Councillor Mann is waving. Everybody's waving. Oh, what's that? Put that right up, Councillor Mann. That a boy. Yeah, it's Police Services Day, and it's wonderful that um, Chief Larkin has agreed to come on and speak to us and talk about the last 13 months from a enforcement, policing, community liaison perspective. And, I can tell you this about Chief Larkin. I've known him for a long, long time. And you get exactly what you see with Chief Larkin. He's a community-minded person. He loves his community. He loves the people in his community, and he's committed and dedicated to keeping us as safe as we possibly can. And, he is a leading communicator in policing services, I think, across the country. There is no chief that I know that communicates as broadly and as concisely and as often as Chief Bryan Larkin does to the people of the region of Waterloo. And I think we all appreciate that. He's just a great leader in our community. And I think we're all very lucky to have him as our chief of police. So Bryan, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much, Greg, and good morning, everybody. It's great to join the Cambridge Chamber, and I see many familiar faces and also reaching out across the region of Waterloo into North Dumfries, and I also see other parts of the region and community joining us. I appreciate the opportunity, Greg. Over the last number of years, I've had the privilege to serve as your chief of police, and always enjoy coming down to the Cambridge Chamber and engaging in discussion and dialogue on current issues, current affairs. But first, I want to actually start on behalf of our service, recognizing you and your chamber and all of your members for your amazing leadership during the global pandemic. I can't imagine what it would like to be a business owner right now. I know the challenges that many of us are facing in government and public sector, but the reality is that we've also, from an economic perspective and a financial perspective, I've not had to worry as an employer about my members being compensated. I've not had to worry about different issues and challenges. And yes, the economics of policing and the economics of public government is, facing many challenges, but the work that you and your team are doing just to support all sizes of business, and most recently your work with Communitech and rolling out rapid testing and bringing a sense of calm to businesses and a sense of relief across the region and beyond. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your leadership. We're living in really challenging, precarious times. And I'm hoping that today we can get through the next 60 minutes without asking ourselves if we're on mute, if you can see me, see our presentation. What a world that we're living in virtually. And myself, I'm coming to you from Woolwich Township today from, I see Mayor Shantz on the call, and coming to you from Woolwich Township because our own service is facing an outbreak declared by public health most recently that actually really, myself was caught in the sort of, I call it the dragnet of public health regulations and public health recommendations, which is amazing. And I think it's important, for all of us to recognize that we have so many amazing things happening across the region. And I'll speak a little bit about, the global pandemic, social climate, certainly open to any questions that the group has, and yourself, Greg, as the moderator. But I suppose that, if anybody asked me, at any given time when you were appointed as the chief of police, that you would try to find chapter 10 in the chief's playbook on leading during a pandemic, and then try to find chapter 12 on leading in a period of social evolution and social justice around equity and inclusion and diversity, which was work that our service was doing before, the incidents and then the tragedies in the United States, which have really pushed for global reform and global evolution of policing in our societies. There really is no playbook. And so, our police services board, our police service, I see Councillor Kiefer, a member of the vice chair of our police board, along with Mayor Shantz, who both sit as members of the Police Services Board, we're sort of actually continue like many of all of you on the call here. We've kind of been actually operating and actually flying the plane while we're actually making adjustments to it. Particularly around the global pandemic, as well as the social evolution of what does the policing look like in a modern day society. I want to speak first about the pandemic. This is I think back, if we all pause for a moment and think where we were, last March and now heading into April. Many of you, like myself, maybe were thinking as we were coming through April and spring was arriving and the beautiful blossoms and blooms were coming out. We were all probably thinking, wow, we're almost there. 2 more weeks of the lockdown and we're back to normal. I was one, admittedly, and I was heavily involved in provincial and national and regional pandemic control groups and listening to, thinking, okay, we can get through this and then we'll get out on the other side. And here we are 13 months later. Policing has adapted really well to the global pandemic, partially because we're an emergency service. We enjoy crisis. We enjoy emergencies. In fact, our members thrive. I always think, Deputy Mayor Mann's with us, but I also refer to his previous leadership role in our community as the Deputy Chief of Police. Often leadership in our organization, when idle hands, we always enjoy crisis and emergency because that's when our best work happens. We thrive under that pressure. And I think, we've done extremely well as a police service around workforce protection and realigning the work that we do and doing business differently. Naturally, like many of you at the start of this, we learned valuable lessons around procurement and actually making sure we have proper PPE stock. But the way that we come into our workforce now, basically, the majority of our members and those that do not have issued sort of smartphones, we have a daily app that our members fill out that pre-screens, pre-monitors, goes into our emergency operations center, which is a specialized team 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, that manages all things pandemic related and works very closely with public health to ensure workforce protection. And we've done remarkably well. You think about the amount of contacts that we have with society and internally within our organization. During the last 13 months, we've kept recruiting going. Clearly, we need to keep and, bring people into organizations. So we found innovative ways to continue to acquire talent and bring people into organization. The Ontario Police College has continued to operate and did reasonably well until the last intake, where, the impact of this, the virus that we're dealing with and how it spreads is amazing. You get to see it, unfortunately, in some of these settings. But overall, we've managed over approximately 1,200 exposures where our members have been exposed to some form of COVID, and 25 positive tests in our organization, and 5 of those coming in the last 4 or 5 days. But it does show you, it's interesting piece. Of how all of us in this pandemic, why we need to keep our guard up and why we need to keep doing what we're doing. We have, a hand sanitizer, an enhanced maintenance system. We're doing all those things. Naturally, we're still operating 24/7. It's one of our, we're one of the unique services that needs to roll 24/7, consistently pushed physical distancing and all these pieces. But I'll explain the last 4 or 5 days what led to the outbreak. We were in a series of mid-leader promotions. And so we were actually, filling vacancies for mid-leader positions in our organization. We had a team of interviewers who were all physically distanced, but of course, spending a day, they were, sipping their coffee, sipping their water, taking their mask off, not wearing eyewear, and really a connection outside of the service. One of our members, their adult child was symptomatic, and our member thought, geez, I feel a little sore today, but maybe it's just the spring allergies, and I'm sitting on promotional interviews, I'm committed, I'm going to come in, and then a couple of days later, I'm really not feeling well, and now I'm definitely symptomatic, and I failed the screening, and all of a sudden, you can see how this rolls out, and 5 leaders actually get caught up in this. And of course, myself just walking through the hallway, acknowledging these individuals and stopping with PPE on, but so it puts everything back in context of how precious are. But I will also share personally, I attended Holiday Inn to the drive-through COVID testing center, and we're so well served by public health, our public health leaders, our public health nurses. The system was amazing. The system was well run. The people are super professional. And, Greg, as I was telling you, in less than 24 hours, I had my results. I'm healthy. I'm, obviously not positive, and I didn't believe so. Even as the chief, I have a leadership role to set the context of, no, I'll go get tested. And so I think that, we're all learning as we go through this, and we've changed the way we do business. But what we've really seen, the first 90 to 6 months, call volume of our service had declined. People were very compliant. People were very much aligned with regulations. As soon as, late June, early July came, some of the compliance waned, but we were also reopening as a province. And then, of course, we went back into sort of some of the challenges we were facing. Our schools were reopening, and so that impacts our workforce. To give you some insight, on any given day, we have about 30 members that are in some form of self-isolation or self-monitoring across our service to ensure, workforce protection. And so we've built up these schedules of reserves and how we do work. And, about 15% of our workforce has been able to realign working from home. It's not a huge amount because of the work that we do. Which often requires tangible people in the building answering 911 calls, members going to service calls. And then the flip side of that, though, is that, in December, when we were sort of right after the holiday season, we saw a spike in our organization. Up until August, we only had 4 positive cases internally. And then from August or from December to January, we bounced about 16 over the holiday season, which our own members clearly weren't necessarily following all the rules. They're like everybody else, human. And then we clamped back down. And so we sort of were like a circadian rhythm in our organization as we roll through here. But it does reinforce this. The third wave obviously is very challenging for all of us, many community decision makers here. And of course, as a service, we've been pivoting and been helping the region. Deputy Chief Shirley Hilton is leading our task force, our vaccine task. So, totally independent and doing a lot of work for public health, along supported by Superintendent Jennifer Davis. And so, we've also internally been having people do different pieces and different supporting, because we truly did, we believe we're all into this. Those decisions weren't without controversy in the community as to why are police leaders leading the task force? Why is that happening? It really comes down to logistics and emergency planning. That's the work we do, is we thrive in crisis. We are working with the region to transition those 2 leaders out of those roles and back into policing, as we have we're facing some significant challenges, and I'll speak to that and then open it up to questions. Policing, first I'll talk about the economics of policing. And there's been a lot of focus on the cost of policing and the WRPS. And whether you talk about, reallocating, defunding, or abolishing police, those types of things. For as long as I can remember, I think I started to get involved in the police budgeting process probably in around 2004. I was working in then Chief Greville's office in research and planning in the executive wing, supporting the deputies and the chief. And was involved in, pulling together budget presentations and pieces. And in 2004, I can remember Chief Greville getting ready to go to the board and or regional council. And quite frankly, it was the dialogue was the police budget is too big. And the chief was really going up there to defend the budget. So the economics of policing, this isn't anything new. This has been a discussion going on, and some of you have been around. Councillor Kiefer maybe could probably recall back in his days on Cambridge Council, the discussions around the cost of policing and some of those pieces. Councillor Reid equally, and others that are on the call. That's the reality. I mean, that's always been sort of the process, and in some ways, it's manufactured. It's a manufactured government piece where well, who's getting the money? Like those things. That's just the politics of money in the system. But what we've seen is a real change and a real call from our community around what policing does and what we look like and what is our mandate. We shouldn't fret that. We should not actually fear change. We should not fear the evolution of modern policing. In fact, we should embrace it, and we should look at opportunities for change. We know that our institutions or inherently have, government institutions, including the police service. There are systemic barriers, there's systemic discrimination, there's systemic racism. We also know that we don't work within a perfect system. And so we should actually be concentrating on how do we actually do better? How do we make it better? How do we grow it differently? And those types of processes, Mental Health Act, mental health calls for service, are one of those key examples. Inherently the police service may intersect, but there's probably, and we know there's a better way to do business, working very closely with the CMHA, public health, with community paramedicine, to looking at a new model, a new integrated approach. How do we triage and around those processes? And so, although the community demands, at times have been loud, at times may be viewed as divisive, and I view these as opportunities. I'm embracing them as the chief of police. Internally, our leadership team is working very hard as to what does the future look like. There's only so much money in the system, and I've always said this. When you put together a really good city or municipal budget, I use the analogy, it's like baking a cake. You got to have all the right ingredients. And if you put too much of something, the cake may not rise, or it may fall, or it may not taste so good, or it may be too sweet. And so when we look at how we allocate monies, we should actually, be having larger discussions as to, what's the true cost? What's the true impact of this? Who does what? There are some things that have landed within policing by sheer nature because, we operate 24/7, 365. It doesn't mean it's right. Where I'll push back, though, is inherently some of the work that we do, which isn't recognized, and that's around shelter care. It's around care and compassion and how we do work. Listen, we're the 6th largest police service in Ontario, the 13th largest police service in Canada. We don't always get it right, and certainly can talk about a recent decision to roll out a specialized cruiser designed by our equity team, which was met with community resistance, met with community feedback. We listened, internally we had much discussions, and obviously, I made a decision to pause and to actually suspend the program, and let's actually look at where the community sees us going. Failure is a part of growth, and internally our members that were, and quite frankly, our racialized members were very upset. Because they felt that their voice had been silenced. They felt that they didn't have the opportunity, to speak. And so we're working through all these different processes. This is a learning lesson. We're a human-based organization, but I think collectively as a community, we should be embracing the calls for evolution, the call for change. I don't use the term reform. I use the term evolution because I think policing is an institution that has been growing and changing with society and with time. Think about it, 30 years ago as a young constable, I would have never envisioned that I'd be before a parliamentary committee talking about decriminalization of small amounts of possession of illicit drugs and doing business differently. I never envisioned myself doing that. But with age and wisdom and experience and seeing the world from a different lens and having my strawberry blonde hair turned to Arctic white, wisdom grows, you change, and you realize that, there's different policy pieces. Who would have ever envisioned that, the chamber would have a number of cannabis companies as a part of the chamber? Let's face it, we all of us grow up in different times. And so I think there's some natural evolution as we roll through here, Greg, which is exciting. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's challenging. It's scary. There's trepidation. And I will say, I do feel for our members. Every single day they're doing amazing work. We average about 800 calls for service a day. They've continued to do their work under some significant pressure. It's pretty hard for them to pick up any sort of local mainstream media and find really any bit of love. And heaven forbid that they go on social media because, I view, Twitter's become really bitter. Quite frankly, social media has become really a very challenging piece for all of us. I think all of us, particularly, those of us that are bureaucrats and or governors are learning how do you manage the narrative in 240 characters or on social media or on a headline click? where people are not reading the whole story or understanding the full facts. But these are, hard times, challenging times. They require strong leadership. As a police service, we're blessed to have a very engaged, very progressive, a very challenging police services board who's working with the leadership of this service to, make positive change. I don't see that as a bad thing. I don't, sometimes you got to sit in a room with your harshest critics to get better and to develop a better product. And I think that that's what we're doing. I like to use the analogy because we're with business-minded individuals. We're running, I'm running a $250 million business with about 1,200 employees that does, works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So our operations are fully running. Our assembly lines are people. We assemble humans. The product we build is we develop, police officers, which is the front-facing piece of the service, but we develop investigators. We develop, policy individuals inside the organization, and we're always retooling. We're always rekitting our assembly lines. We're changing the color of our product. Our packaging looks different. All of those things are things that we're doing that aligns with the business world. We're very advanced. We're very progressive. We run a Lean Six. We have a black belt that works out of the chief's office that looks at efficiencies within the service, looks at processes and all those things. So we're doing all these amazing things. I think where we are working very hard is to tell the story and to share the story. But that's all part of the gig.
Yeah.
As we roll through here, Greg. So enough from me, but that's kind of the context of where we're at, Greg. I'll flip it over to you.
That's an amazing in-depth view, I think, of what certainly from a police services perspective, and those of us who rely on you day in and day out. Well, we might not think of you every day. I get a lot of chance to think about the police services, actually, because oftentimes I come in very early in the morning, and oftentimes they're in my parking lot, and watching something or checking out traffic flows or whatever the case may be. But I always take that opportunity to pull up beside them and thank them for their service and what they're doing to protect our community, and certainly appreciate it. In fact, I tell all of them, you're more than welcome to be in our parking lot anytime you want to be in our parking lot. It's a comforting thing. But Chief, I want to ask a question. You've got a couple of, you're talking to a group of business owners and business, managers and people who work in business every single day. And I think maybe more so than just about anybody, we understand that you're never, you're not always going to make the right decision. You're going to make, you're going to trip and fall. And, everybody on this call has made errors in their life or in their business life, or decisions that they've made that maybe they could have thought about them a little bit more, or maybe gone a different direction. But, I think that's just as you stated, it's about the evolution of our own selves. And as we run a company or a police service, or we're working in government, we're always trying to find out ways where we can do things a little bit better. One of the people on the call is Valet Car Wash, Mike Black, who pivoted to some degree and started sanitizing, and actually posted the other day on social media a picture of some cruisers going through that he was washing, cleaning, and sanitizing, and keeping them safe for your staff that are using them on a regular basis. And I think that's just awesome collaboration between business and government and police services. But I want to take you back to 13 months ago, when the premier of the province, when the World Health Organization, of course, declared a global pandemic, when the premier of Ontario came out and said, we're shutting everything down. And I think, I got to think that everybody on this call was in the same shoes as probably I was. And, you kind of look at your coworker and your eyes kind of go big, and you go, what the hell just happened, and what's going on? And how am I going to navigate my organization or even my life through this? What was one of the primary concerns that you had as chief of police when all of a sudden the realization that we're into something here that's going to affect everybody equally? What were some of the primary concerns that first crossed your mind and said, we need to attack this?
Yeah, it's a great question, Greg. Just before the pandemic really hit in March, we were gearing up for St. Patrick's Day in Waterloo. But previous to that, like just as actually we were I was actually at an international Chiefs meeting. The Canadian Chiefs had asked me to attend a meeting on their behalf. And it was centered around wellness and suicide prevention and policing. We were looking, working at national platforms and was actually in Miami. It was the chief of Miami that was hosting the meeting, and it was sort of late February, and it was sort of the pandemic farther advanced in America, and the cruise ships were coming into the Miami harbor and port, and and I was discussing with American police leaders were essentially saying we're not ready for this, and so started talking with Canadian police leaders. On March 16th, so I had come back to Canada and we were sort of having some discussions, obviously speaking with public health and trying to figure this out. And on March 16th, at about 9 o'clock at night, Minister Sylvia Jones reached out to me and said, can you take a call? And, and so who's our Solicitor General? And so I was on the phone with Minister Jones, and she said, Chief, I know you're gearing up for St. Patrick's Day. We're very concerned, the province is looking at some different processes, and we're thinking about actually issuing a state of emergency. And prior to that, we as a service were talking with Dr. Wong in public health around Section 22 order, actually around actually declaring, Ezra, public health risk. And I know Mayor Jaworski's on the line as well here. And so, but I'm sitting in my home office, and the minister says, we're actually going to shut the province down tomorrow. And I can tell you, it's not often, those of you that know me, I'm not lost for words often, but I could feel my whole stomach just, sink, you just get that feeling of, oh my goodness. And then I started, I obviously called Chair Redmond and it's called my police leadership team to say, like, things are going to shake up here tomorrow. Of course, we had this massive mobilization ready to roll. And of course, the next morning, we had signs all through the university district saying state of emergency, stay home. And for the, I assembled the leadership team. And, every single day, our leadership team met to discuss what are we going to do? How are we going to get people home? And so what was interesting, out of this, though, was that, for the last couple of years, I've talked about how do we modify our workforce? How do we make it more attractive for families, particularly on their civilian professionals, which are, about almost 30% of our workforce now. But how do we make it more attractive? How do we get people maybe with a work from home structure? And of course, every single time I would raise it, I was told, this can't be done. It can never happen. We don't have the infrastructure. You're an idiot. Stop with your crazy ideas. And within 3 days, we had 15% of our workforce working from home, and infrastructure in place. And, we made it happen. And for me, there's a pivotal moment there of, if we actually put our mind to things, we can create the change we want to see within organizations. My biggest worry, I started thinking about budget. I started thinking about, potentially, workforce that could be gravely ill, because we were seeing in America, the rate of infection in police services was significant, and they were losing whole platoons. And so we started changing our landscape to that whole process. And then equally on top of this, let's face it, it impacts our personal lives. I have aging parents in another province, and I recognize that, I'm not going to see them for a while. The way we do groceries, the way that we, at the start of this, and we didn't really know what it was. I'd come home every day from the office because I would go to my office and isolate in my office for the day. And I would come home, but I would actually wash my uniform every day. Like I think all of us were probably wiping down our groceries. It changed all of our lives. And I think that, probably 30 days into this, I started working with our wellness team, and really based on some discussions, credit to Mayor Shantz very early on, and Mayor Foxton, two of them on these pandemic control groups kept saying, well, it's great that we're dealing with all the public health issues, but we need a wellness strategy. People are going to become unwell. And then they were saying that at the start. And so I actually stole that internally. I always think good ideas, you can thieve those. That's when thievery is the one time it should be allowed. And internally, I was saying to our wellness team, okay, what are we going to do? How do we actually build a wellness program? Because you could see the heightened stress of our people. It's not normal, like, to wear gloves every single day, to wear goggles, to wear a mask, to rinse your, like, we've been using isogel and all that stuff for a long time. But we actually, we're using a pen at a service call and then actually discarding it. So it changed all of our processes. And so for me, I was like, okay, how do I pull the team together? How do I rally them? I had a leadership team that has children, that has kids, all those different, how do I keep them rallied? How do I keep them motivated? And so actually, we were meeting every single day. And I'll give you some insight. I actually would start every meeting with some motivational song or tune, which would, talk about the time. And I try to relate it to, some fun. And we started actually playing this Name That Tune on virtual leadership calls. And actually to breathe some life into this. We rolled out a ton of internal wellness strategies, town hall sessions, and those types of things. But our biggest, this will sound really minimal here, but we had a phenomenal relationship with our unions. They've been along the journey with us around the pandemic piece. Not so much on contract and some of those things. That's all, and arbitration. That's another story for another day. But the reality is the biggest thing that upset our members was we closed our fitness facilities. And we felt that, if a citizen cannot actually go to the YMCA or to a boutique gymnasium, then our members should actually not, on a day off, be able to come into the office to use our fitness facility. And quite frankly, it upset, I remember saying to Deputy Hilton and Deputy Crowell, Mark and Shirley, my deputies, two lovely leaders, phenomenal people. I said, if this is the worst pushback we're getting from the union, we're doing okay. Right? Like, we're doing okay. And so we had to manage this whole piece. And then, we did reopen our fitness facilities with all the right things. And in the most recent shutdown, we closed them again. And our members really feel upset that, we're impacting their health, their wellness. It's the only outlet they have. And so we're trying to balance that whole piece as we roll through here.
Yeah. It's interesting how I can remember, how you, by the way, you should think like a chamber executive thinks. Stealing good ideas is always acceptable. It's not real theft. It's a good idea, right? And everybody wants to share their good ideas. So when you steal them, it actually reinforces their thought that their idea was really good. So it's actually, kind of maybe should be encouraged more often. But I think back when you were talking about, it kind of forces you, you would bring up, how do we make our police services more, family friendly, and how do we figure that all out? How do we get people, maybe giving them the choice to work remotely and always getting kickback, and you're getting kickback from your HR department saying, well, how do we measure productivity? How do we do all that? How do we, we don't understand how that's all going to work or how we can control it or moderate it. And so, then the natural thing is to say, well, let's put that on the shelf for another discussion some other day. It reminds me of teaching my kids when they were jumping off of a diving board one time. And I would be on the diving board and they were at the end of the diving board, and they're looking down and they're scared and I'm saying to them, don't wait for me to come and push you off the diving board, because you're going to learn nothing if I push you off the diving board. You're only going to learn if you actually jump off the diving board. That's when you learn, and it sheds your fear, because now you've tried something new that you hadn't done before and it makes you feel good. And I think, it's a really, all the way through this pandemic has been a really good lesson learned for all of us, that we need to look outside that box more regularly. We need to say, how do we, take those chances or those risks, or maybe we look at things a little bit differently and look at how they could work. Because oftentimes we look at this type of technology now, we all live with this every single day, multiple times a day, most of us. And, is it ever going to go away? No, it's been, it's actually a creative little piece for us to, we can have regional meetings all day long by Zoom, as opposed to trying to get across town and meet in person. So I think you're right that it's we were always restricted, and I think some of the challenges through the pandemic have actually created opportunities for leaders to say, hey, we learned that lesson. Let's start looking outside the box, and let's look for ways we can change and make things better and more comfortable for our employees. Because the reality of it is, you have 1,200 employees. Your real responsibility is to those people and the families that they represent, both in keeping them safe, but also in making sure that you provide every opportunity for them to grow within your organization.
Absolutely, and I think that I'm really impressed with the innovation piece that's occurred, and I think that the innovation that we're doing internally, just actually rolling out a whole smartphone strategy right now will lead to other efficiencies, which should either cost contain, cost avoid, and have a long-term impact on the police budget, which is something that we're working very hard in to manage, and we recognize some of the pressures it puts on other regional pieces as we roll through here. And I think that that's, incumbent upon us. And I always try to share, when I'm with business leaders, to say we are operating, completely as a business. We look at everything. We look at procurement. We look at how we source pieces. Like we've actually, we're sourcing some PPE through the regional Waterloo, but we were able to find a better approach actually by joining other police services and actually reduce the funding. So we actually broke away from, regional procurement and said, you know what, we can actually get a better deal here. With our emergency services, we've been sharing PPE, at the initial part of this. Some of our fire services didn't have enough, or our paramedics didn't have enough, so we had some extra. So I think things have really gone well in that sense. But there are also some underbelly things that we look at. We look at how our marginalized and our homeless are being impacted by the pandemic. We look at encampments in 10 cities and the continued addiction and mental health challenges we face as a community. I see a question in the chat box from Steve in relation to the legalization of cannabis. And has it created unexpected surprises, positive or negative? Steve, I think, I've always actually I've had a very balanced or measured approach around drug policy. It's something I got interested in really actually in about 2008. And actually a friend of mine who was on the board of Stonehenge Therapeutic Community Center, a drug treatment center in Wellington County, approached me and said, hey, they're looking for board members, and I think you'd be really good at this. And they also, most of their clients actually were correctional clients, because they had a halfway house designation. And they said, would you be interested in coming to a board meeting and meeting the executive director? So I said, sure, no problems. And I went to, and 10 years I served on the Stonehenge Therapeutic Board, and 6 of those as the chair. And it really changed my insight into legislation, drug policy, integrated drug strategies, harm reduction, the need for care, and those types of pieces. And so much of my lens, changed. I saw it from policing, which, was traditionally a very stringent approach on drugs. And listen, we should target illicit drug traffickers and those organized crime that make, in Canada, billions of dollars. But the legalized cannabis was something where, you look at any sort of survey or any sort of data, Canadians were using cannabis, even if it was illegal, they were using it significantly. Even in our recruiting processes, 90% of our candidates coming through to be police officers had experimented with some form of cannabis use prior to becoming a police officer. And so, I never predicted, when they were, I thought they were going to decriminalize it. And in fact, I think in 97 or 98, the then president of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, a fellow by the name of Larry Graville, who was your chief, actually was pushing a ticketing regime, saying, we should just ticket for this, particularly because we have, so many students, our officers are tied up in court, $50 fine. So that being said, the legalization piece, 2 things. One is that, the drug impaired driving has increased. Our detection rates have increased. I wouldn't say it's a surprise, but, we have more people trained. we're paying more attention, and so we are seeing the true impacts around drug impaired driving. So I would say that that's a positive outcome, that we're actually doing a better job in policing and managing it and understanding it. Um, the unexpected surprise is that I believe that everybody thought there would be, for example, in condominiums and townhomes, that police and municipal bylaw departments would be inundated with issues of this person's, growing, this person's on their balcony. That didn't flourish. The other piece is that, in Ontario, smoking cannabis at a street corner is lawful. And when that was first announced, I'll tell you, even myself as a chief went, no, I don't think that's a good idea. You can't have a cold one at the corner of the street. In fact, we ticket for that, but you'll be able to have your cannabis. And at the time, the Attorney General was Minister Mulrooney, and I can remember having a pretty vibrant conversation with her, saying, like, "Are you serious? Like, what are you thinking?" Because quite frankly, we thought that this would be a massive issue. It really isn't. The issues with cannabis have really been fairly easy to manage. One of the unexpected surprises has been the continued underground market. It's thriving. Organized crime, we thought, would actually transition, Steve, into other areas. And they haven't. They've continued to and they're pushing, supply and some of those processes. So, the province continues to fund 6, they're called green teams across the province. It's coordinated by the OPP. Our service has members involved, where we're actually targeting the illicit supply and the illicit piece, because one of our processes was we actually encourage people to go to legalized cannabis shops, because safe supply. They know that what they're actually inhaling, they know what they're purchasing, those types of things. So I think overall, there's been some positives. One of the negatives, I'll say, is sort of the edible rollout. We have seen a couple of serious cases where access or the packaging has, it still impacts. We've had a couple of cases in our region where children have been seriously harmed, by thinking it, the edible was a jube or a gummy bear, those types of things. I still think the chiefs are still pushing federal government to really work on the edible packaging, what edibles look like, colors, and those types of things. But I would say overall, it locally has not had a massive impact on policing, other than the driving piece, which was kind of expected. We're doing better, so I think that's a positive outcome. If you think of the illegal shops that were in Cambridge in particular, there was a couple that were nonstop. I think we've normalized that. I see Mr. Calder, the city manager. I do think that one of our concerns is that they're kind of like payday or check loaning places. They pop up everywhere, and I think that from a good planning perspective, we need to manage what that looks like, and we still need to make sure that they're following, and this isn't a municipal issue, it's a provincial issue, following the regulations around proximity to schools and some of those things.
Yeah. Let's stick with the the drug thing. Not that I always like to talk about that, but it is in your wheelhouse a little bit. I had a question that was presented by email to me from an individual who couldn't attend this morning, who wanted me to ask this question of you. Cambridge is currently looking for a CTS location. Can you update us on how the Kitchener CTS is going from your perspective? And in your view, should we expect similar results in our community?
Yeah, great question, Greg, and always a polarizing one. And so I always start out with, I'm not here to change anybody's mind. I'm not here to actually challenge your beliefs, your opinions. Everybody's entitled to them, because I want to be clear. Like, I don't actually support the perpetual use of drug use. It's a public health risk, and we need to work at prevention and work at a healthy life. The Kitchener consumption treatment site, I mean, it's been an interesting rollout. We put a lot of effort into it. Our service was heavily involved in the integrated drug strategy, heavily involved with public health, heavily involved with the city of Kitchener. We did sort of a pre-analysis, so we looked at crime and calls for police service in the area. And I'll be very candid. I mean, there was challenges in the area where it was going previously, that open consumption of drugs was a regular piece. It was being done in the communities. It was being done in washrooms and city halls, etc. So we were supportive of rolling out the consumption treatment site because, our overdose rates were up, overdose deaths were up, our calls for service were up, particularly in that area. And the reality is the first year went amazingly well. We actually have a monthly meeting with the neighborhood association, with all the stakeholders, with Sanguine, with everyone, where we actually talk about, what's happening, what's reality, what's perception. We actually shared crime data. It was very stagnant. There's a couple of outcomes that we saw. One was public discard of, needles and drug paraphernalia declined because people were using at the site. And so it was discarded in a proper hazardous approach. Overdose calls were down in the area because people were going to the site where there was a public health nurse supporting and caring and making sure everybody was safe. Complaints of trespassing and drug use, for example, in City Hall washroom or in private washrooms in commercial restaurants, obviously declined because people were going there. We didn't see the actual push around drug trafficking around the area. Now, we did enhance policing, and we did actually we had 2 full-time officers working in the area as community engagement officers. Crime remained relatively stable, didn't go up significantly, didn't go down significantly. It stayed fairly stable. I think there was 6 service calls for the police to actually in a 12-month period at the actual location, and nothing significant. One was a theft of a laptop. The others were sort of complaints and or a medical call where we were required. The challenge is 2020 was an anomaly because, quite frankly, with shelter care, many of those that would have used the consumption treatment site in Kitchener were, moved elsewhere in the region. In Kitchener in particular, there was shelter care on Carwood Ave, as well as in King Street East. And then in Cambridge, even there were some changes with obviously the Super 8 motel up at Hesper Pine Bush. Public health is currently doing a full review right now. Our police service is involved in that. It should be done sometime mid-year, and obviously will be made public. But the community has been embracing. I mean, there's obviously challenges. They have questions, but we've worked our way through a lot of the issues. And I would say, from my perspective, a success. Yet we've seen in other communities in the city of Calgary, the rollout was not coordinated. It wasn't well executed. It wasn't well planned, and it had significant challenges. So I think that those are the things we need to work on. And so whatever, does happen in Cambridge, my recommendation is that the police service, and there's a time right now where some people don't want the police at the table. And I disagree with that because inherently we're going to be involved. So let's actually have a good strategic rollout. We've learned some lessons, even the shelter care movement, when we went from, Kitchener up into Waterloo. We spent a lot of time with social services, with the city of Waterloo, with their bylaw, their community engagement team, educating and raising awareness and building opportunities for feedback. I think we've learned some good ways to roll things out, Greg. So see what happens. But I do actually, I think everybody knows, I do believe that it's another tool in the toolbox. It's not the panacea. I think the provincial government rolling out and changing the sheer concept of it being a usage site, there now has to be treatment. There has to be that outreach, I think are all positive things. But the reality is that, we've got to get people on the right path to recovery, and they need to do it in a safe way. And I think the next larger dialogue our community needs to have is around safe supply, and how do we ensure it's a medical model where we can support those that are marginalized and vulnerable. These are our citizens. These are people that, live in our community and found themselves in some challenging, it could be vicarious trauma. It could be a traumatic background that has led them to where they're at. It could be job loss. It could be a mental wellness issue. And so I think we all collectively, it's a polarizing piece. I recognize that it impacts, businesses. I recognize it impacts neighborhoods. But how do we collectively get behind this? I think we're all smart enough that if we come together and we actually focus on solutions and resolutions versus why something won't work or why it shouldn't happen, I think we could get a better outcome. And we've seen that in Kitchener. I think we've had good dialogue with the neighborhood association, good dialogue with the city. Everybody's had a voice, and I think the outcome's been better, Greg. So overall, a success. Stay tuned. The report should be made public. They're just doing the whole review right now. The only caveat I'll put is 2020 is an anomaly because the usage of the actual site declined because of some of the other policy decisions.
Well, yeah. And I think those variables are things that nobody can predict and nobody can understand oftentimes. But I think, having you or your folks at the table understanding clearly, because they're dealing with it every single day in one way or another, is invaluable resources to have. There was a quick comment by Gary Shea in there about a circumstance of, an individual hunting down a police officer to thank them. I think we don't, it kind of brought to mind, we don't hear all those great stories. We hear all the bad stories all the time, but we don't hear the great stories often enough about how people feel about the police services. And we had and I should have probably tweeted it out, but we had a circumstance here a couple of years ago now where, somebody came in the middle of the night, broke our back door, smashed it in and broke in. And of course, I was fortunate enough to be in Thunder Bay at a conference at the time when your police officer called me on my cell phone and said, "Hey, Greg, just want to know how quickly you can get to the chamber because somebody just broke in the back door." I said, "Well, not very quickly. I'm in Thunder Bay right now, so I'm not sure when I can get back." But of course, I phoned home and Lisa darted up in the middle of the night. I think it was, probably about 1 o'clock or 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night. And the officer was absolutely an amazing individual to stand there, make sure that she was safe and felt comfortable until such time as an individual could come and put a temporary barrier up there. And they are human beings just like all of us, and they care about other people. And in fact, maybe for the most part, they care more because they've chosen a profession where it's their job to care for people. And so we don't hear those stories often enough. And I apologize for not tweeting that one out or posting that one out. But I think, it's maybe a good lesson learned. We need to be sharing those good news stories too.
Yeah, no apologies needed. I mean, let's be candid. I mean, crisis and, all the different pieces, that's what, people are interested in. And we get it. I mean, we understand it. And, we're not actually looking, for, to do things. I mean, recently we wanted to thank our healthcare workers, on the 1 year anniversary. And we did low key. We just went out and actually wanted to do it. We obviously contacted all of the healthcare and long-term care facilities, and we worked with fire services and paramedics. Those are the things that we do. I mean, I think our people join for a noble profession to make change. I guess like anything else, I always believe when you go into a business and if somebody is wearing a name tag, say to them, "Hello, Greg, how's your day going?" or thank them. I think kindness goes a long way.
Yeah.
And I think, from the seat that listen, it's a privilege to be the chief. I mean, it's been an amazing journey of leadership, community leadership. I get to work with amazing people, see amazing things, and I see more good than actually bad across the region, if I'm candid. We're doing amazing things, but, we often don't pause, as citizens. We don't, the art of being grateful is a thing of the past. And those of you that are business leaders and dealing with employees and all the different stressors, people have short memories. And so I think all of us have a collective amount of responsibility to promote positivity, and not shy away from tough issues or challenging issues, because I think that's important. But we can't always be looking in the rearview mirror either. I believe that, we're reconciling a police service. We've been reconciling our past. We're dealing with present issues, and we're really building a future that where every of our members are going to thrive. We had we challenged, gender equity and gender balance in our organization 7 years ago when I became the chief. Obviously I went through a class action lawsuit, which again, it opens up opportunities for positive, progressive, modernized change as we move through these things. And, before equity and inclusion teams were sort of the in vogue or popular thing, and I don't mean to take away from that work, we were doing it. We had one. We had an equity plan. But it didn't really get a lot of media attention. And now everybody's talking about it. But listen, we're not resting on our laurels. We're advancing. We're moving forward. We got a team of dedicated people. And my only ask is, is remember, we're human.
Yep.
We have the same fragilities that every other single citizen has. We come to work, our members come to work. They may have not slept because they have a young child that is keeping them up, and the joys of a parenting. They may have aging parents like myself. When I get a phone call in the middle of the night, it's generally work, but I'll be candid. Often I think about, okay, is something wrong with my parents?
Yeah.
Some people have family issues, health issues. We're all living it. And I think that somewhere in our world, we've actually, I think perfection is great, but I think we should strive for excellent first. And that has to be the focus. But, I do see a couple of quick questions here,
Yep.
around, some of the work of our mental health piece. We're doing a ton of work internally. Just a quick question on our fitness facilities is our facilities are regional facilities, and they were closed by order of our medical officer of health, and that's why we could not actually manage it. But we have other strategies in place, and we have outdoor activities in place. The board has been investing in some work around headquarters with a walking trail, those types of things. But again, I know we're close on time here, Craig. Greg, I just want to say thanks so much. It's awesome to see all these amazing faces.
COVID fatigue concerns within the organization? Are they? They're with every organization. We're all sick of it. But how are you dealing with it? Is that through your mental health programs for your staff as well?
Yeah, I think COVID fatigue has definitely occurred both internally and externally. Last week we announced a COVID integrated response team. Our compliance rates are down significantly. Those of you that are community leaders and have bylaw units, the weekends, the large gatherings, the parties, there's significant demands on all of the policing, public health, and bylaw units. We felt it was important to launch a team. We're also dealing with civil disobedience. We have one particular a place of worship that just simply refuses to, have any wiggle room. And so it's, really in many ways, we've tried to educate, we've tried to raise awareness. We've, went through a civil litigation process and had some success. But the community is now demanding action. And so we had to do some different pieces. And of course, we have protesting happening on a regular basis. So again, recognizing, definitely it's there. But my final comment would be is folks, I know this is hard, but I think we all need to dig in, at least until September. We need to dig deep. We need to lead hard, and we need to challenge those that, are pushing us to do things that, may not be in the best interest of the greater good.
Yeah.
And last but not least, if you're willing and able, get the jab and flex those pipes and take a vaccine, and make it happen.
Yeah. Toughen up a little bit. Don't wait for me to push you off the diving board. That's you get that vaccine. I only had one bad experience with police officers in my life. I was 18 years old, and I was going up Dunbar Road, and I got a ticket for 10 miles. It was miles at that time, 10 miles over the speed limit. And then 2 hours later, I was coming back down Dunbar Road, and I got the same cop gave me the same ticket for another 10 miles over the limit. And Mike Mann will know him very, and you probably do too, Brian. It was Hugh Purvis that gave me the two, and he laughed the second time. He said, "Greg, you'll never learn." The only satisfying part about it was my father really appreciated Hugh's attention to my driving that particular day. But I think, Brian, overall, we certainly appreciate what you and your force does for all of our sakes, to be healthy and safe and protect our business and protect the people that work at our businesses. And you are certainly a leader of choice from our perspective to head up our police services. We certainly appreciate everything you do, and so humbled that you'll come on and speak to our members like this on a Wednesday morning from 9 to 10. I know normally or oftentimes you have police services at this time, so I can't always steal your attention, but thanks so much I know you're really busy, but thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Thanks so much, Greg, and thanks to everybody. And this is, more pleasurable than the Police Service Board meeting. Some humor there for Mayor Shantz and Councillor Kiefer. But on a serious note, stay well, everybody. Stay healthy. And most importantly, stay amazing. You're all incredible people. See you soon.
Thanks very much. Have a great day, folks. Get out there and work, and stay safe.